Good. I was going to say good morning, everybody, but it's actually good afternoon. I'm Alistair Gunn. I'm the director of the Glasgow City Innovation District. It's great to see a great crowd here at the next session here at Digit West. For all of you in this stage two, we're all focused on space innovation, which is for any of you who have been following what's happening here in Glasgow City, the kind of space sector is definitely the sector that's evolving very, very quickly. We've got two speakers today, which both from great companies within the Glasgow City region. We've got Andrew Strain, CTO from AC Clyde Space, and we've also got Hazel Jeffrey, Head of Systems of Craft Prospect. Andrew is the CTO of Clyde Space, which are based out in Sky Park. And for any of you who have been following Clyde Space's kind of journey, it's certainly amazing to see the growth and the development of the business. And we've also got Hazel Jeffrey, which another business called Craft Prospect. I think, again, if I remember right, it was a spin out from Clyde, which is again linked into the kind of CubeSat kind of area and development. So what we're going to do today is we've got two speakers. They'll obviously go through their own presentations, and then what we'll do is come back and have a 10 minutes kind of Q&A. We're due to finish about 12:45, and I hope all of you have a great session. And we'd like to first ask Andrew up to the stage, please. Please put a hand together for Andrew.
Okay, good morning everybody. Can you hear me okay? Good. I just thought I'd check that because this is quite a weird setup. I've never seen it like this. So I'll just start working through the slides then. Check, see where we are. Got a couple of introduction slides. I'll skip them because it doesn't add any significant value to what we're doing, but I feel like I have to put that at the start of every presentation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a bit of a view of the whole kind of value chain of the space industry, and then a little bit about what we do at AAC Clyde Space and all the different ways we interact with that, all the way from bits of satellites right through to satellite data, things that come from satellites. But I'm kind of working on the assumption that not everybody work in the space industry, so I'll give you a bit of a view of as much of it as I can in the kind of the beginning of that. So in terms of the value chain in the space industry, people a lot of the time talk about lots of different things within the space industry. And for us, there's three main parts to it. There's products, missions, and space data as a service. And what it is really is the bits that you put into satellites, the bits that make satellites work, building satellites themselves and putting them together with the payloads, which are generally when people say, what does the satellite do? The payload is what it does. So it might be a camera, it might be an RF receiver, something like that. So that's a kind of satellite. The satellite then has to talk to the Earth and all the stuff that goes with that, launch, owning it, running it, operating it. And then there's the data that comes from it and putting all of that together with other space data, with data about the satellite and other things. So there's lots of different levels that you can interact with the space industry, and there's lots of different types of data that we have to work with, from manufacturing data, telemetry data, and actual data from satellites as well. So it's a real broad kind of value chain that's available to us. So a little bit about Clyde Space itself, or AAC Clyde Space as it is now. We were founded back in 2005. I think we were the first or second, depending on who you speak to, space company, entirely focused space company in Scotland. The other one was Star Dundee. And we started out with, I was the second employee, so that was about 18 years ago I joined. And there wasn't really a space industry to speak of in Scotland. There were pockets of space interaction, there were people that did little space, but there wasn't really a space industry. So back then, around about 20 years ago, that was when it really started to kick off, and we started to actually make things that were focused on delivering for space. Now we have sites all over the world. We've got about 200 people, and we have moved from working in that kind of first section of just the products right through the entire value chain of the space industry within Clyde Space, but also the Scottish space industry has grown massively as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But to give you an idea of some of the types of things that we make, we've got about 40 products across the group. The types of things that we have are power systems. So we take the solar panels, we'll take the power from the sun, they'll convert it. We'll use a power system to convert it to charge a battery. We'll use a battery to distribute power to the satellite to run all the electronics. We'll have a computer on there to run the mission, the onboard computer, which will take the maintenance and management of the satellite, make sure it's working, make sure it's healthy, make sure it's doing all the things it should do. We'll have an attitude control system that is able to figure out where the satellite is, use a whole array of sensors, a sun sensor, use the fine sun sensors, star cameras, look at the Earth's magnetic field, magnetometers, put all of that through a filter, run it through an algorithm to figure out where the satellite is, where does it want to be, and then send information to actuators, so magnetorquers, torque rods that will create a magnetic field and turn the satellite, and reaction wheels that will spin to turn the satellite. So there's a lot of products that go into just being able to get a satellite to work from space, and it doesn't matter if you're flying the James Webb Telescope or you're flying a CubeSat, a lot of those things are the same. And radio, I didn't mention radios, you need to be able to talk to it, it's quite important. So there's lots of subsystems that you need. So we have a lot of those systems that we sell ourselves, and we sell those to other companies that are building satellites all over the world. We've sold so many of them that cumulatively we have hundreds of units on orbit, which means that over time we've built up heritage, which is really important in the space industry. The heritage proves that it works on orbit, it does what it says it should do, and you can't really just replace a battery if it's going flat. You can't turn it off and on again, although the satellite will do that itself. But you have to be able to trust what you're putting up on orbit, because there's an investment in getting it there. So the heritage we built up is over a millennia, is the phrase we've used there, because we have hundreds of satellites on orbit with hundreds of systems going to different things. We've also got things that have gone to the moon. We actually had a power system that was on the Intuitive Machines moonlander recently. We've got things that have orbited the moon, we've got solar panels and power systems around there, and we've got software going to Jupiter. So the space industry as an opportunity is massive, can go in lots of different ways, and again, lots of different ways that we can interact with it. When we take all of those things and we put them together, you build satellites, and that turns into your mission. So that's a scale model of a satellite, but the scale is 1:1. So that's a mock-up of a satellite that is actually just deorbited. So this is a 3U satellite. It's about 4 kilograms, and it'll last about 4 or 5 years on orbit. It travels at about 7 kilometers a second. It will go around the world in 90 minutes. And when it comes back down, it's still traveling about that fast. It hits the Earth's atmosphere and it burns up. So when we get to the session, I expect people to ask me about space junk and deorbit and all the rest of it. They burn up really fast, and they're in low Earth orbit. So that gives you an idea of the size and scale of the type of satellite that we work on and we build. Hazel will talk to you in a minute from Craft Prospect about a slightly bigger satellite, but that's the most common size that we've built historically. Things are getting a little bit bigger, but we're not talking about massive satellites here. So taking all of the systems I talked about, we've got to fit them in this box. So we've got our solar panels, we've got a radio, an antenna there, we've got the power system inside, so there's a big stack of electronics in there. And this one had, in the flight unit, it had a kind of probes coming off of these sides here, looking at plasma and space weather. So it's gathering data on that kind of thing as well. Now, I'm not sure if I've got space to put it down. I'll stick it down there, because my arm's getting tired. Because it's a satellite, but it's still 4 kilos, you know, hold all of that. And then what we do is we take that data and we use the data that the satellites are generating, and we try and make it useful. So for our business, we're focusing now on 2 main data streams, and we refer to it as plants and boats. And what we're looking at really there is Earth observation with agriculture purposes, and boats in terms of tracking. So about 80% of the world's commodities travel by sea, and every ship in the ocean has an AIS transmitter on it, so you can track those ships. And if you can track those ships, you can track all the commodities in the world. So there's a big market for traceability and logistics planning and all the rest of it that can be done. And that's a system that was designed primarily as a terrestrial system. So it was the AIS system, automatic identification system, was a network of stations near the coastlines, tracking all the ships and getting information from these transceivers. And it's designed to work over the course of about 1,000 kilometres. These satellites orbit anywhere between 300 kilometres and 1,000 kilometres. So they plan to have the system looking that way for tracking the data. We're looking at it from over here. But what we can see is that can track every part of the world. So a constellation of them, maybe 20 of those satellites, can give you global coverage instead of having ground-based systems all over the place. So there's a cost to putting it up, there's a cost to making it work, but the return that you can get on it and the data sets you can get on it are global. So in our focus, we're looking at the maritime industry and the Earth observation, but they're capable of other things as well. In terms of the Scottish space industry, I mentioned earlier, it's about 18 years since I've been started working in this industry, and there wasn't much. There's now a lot of companies, there's a lot of interest in this industry, and there's a lot right across the value chain. Scotland's in a quite unique position that it has almost everything you need, and pretty soon, hopefully, everything you need to be able to run an entire space mission, right from component build to data analytics and integration. So we have a significant opportunity as a country to be able to take advantage of that if we can work well together. I haven't changed the text on this slide, but this is a picture of the team that we had at Clyde Space in 2017. And what I've done is I've stuck some of the logos of the companies that people have either gone on from there to found, to work at, or that are involved in the space industry. So apologies to Hazel because I put the Craft Prospect logo right over your face in that picture. Some of the other things that the satellites can do, I mentioned earlier, things like ocean colour monitoring, and I'll come back to that one, wildfire detection, early warning systems, air pollution, anything that needs big data sets, big wide geographic spread, things that are in isolated areas, these are really effective for. So there's lots of different applications, and what we're finding is over the past 20 years, I've seen this go from people building these satellites as a technology demonstration or to prove out a technology for a bigger satellite, to actually realizing that these are valuable satellites. These can gather the data. It's better for some types of data, and we don't replace everything, but it's better for some types of data for this size of satellite. It also has a different risk profile. We can launch a lot of these for the cost of one really big satellite. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of the data we actually get from space. Just to make sure that I've kind of explained myself properly. The Seahawk mission was a mission that we did with NASA and the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And it was an ocean colour monitoring satellite that replaced a much older set of satellites. So what I've shown you there is the scale and the size of the satellite that we put up. So Seahawk, right down in the bottom corner. And it's kind of like a mirror of this. So this satellite is that size. So Seahawk is the same size as the satellite on the ground there. It replaced satellites that were much bigger than it. So if you look at the MODIS satellite that was launched in 1999, nearly 5,000 kilograms, and the size of that is nearly 8 meters tall. Looking at those two satellites, Seahawk had better resolution. So in that time frame, the technology had moved forward so much that we could get better resolution from something that was so much smaller, 1,000 times lighter, much smaller, and it gave better resolution and better data to the ocean colour monitoring community. Those images in that mission through NASA was all publicly available, but then there was post-processing work done on the images and things like that people were looking to try and add value to that. Then I've got a couple of nice pictures just to give you an idea of the types of things. So the images that Seahawk takes are actually really long images. They don't look good on a slide. So these are just sections of images taken by the satellite that size, looking at, and you can see the kind of the colour of the ocean. You're looking at plankton, you're looking at ocean temperature to see the health of the ocean and all that kind of stuff. So they're just kind of nice images to give you an idea of what type of data you can get, and then they get fed into the wider ecosystem. When it comes to the agriculture stuff, we look a lot at plant growth, we look at crop health, we can look at forestry health. So one of the key things that we've been looking at recently with Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Government, is forestry mapping. And I don't know, this one's got a kind of video on it. I don't know if I can make it go. I think it's running. So what we've done is we've mapped Scotland, and we've broken it up into sections that we can then identify where there's heavy forestry using satellite imagery. And then we can zoom in on that, and we can look closer at the data that's available, and we can look at what's the health of certain areas of forestry. So if there's disease running through the forest culture, we can see that data much earlier than if you're going to run a drone test or anything like that, because of the repeat rate that you're getting from these satellites. So it stands as a business case to be able to have that type of service and availability for forestry monitoring and health in Scotland. But once you've invested once in those satellites and that capability, you can use it for the whole world. So again, it's a different mode of operation that people need to think about when they think about these satellites. So basically that gives you an idea of a couple of the applications that we're working on and we're capable of. And then I'll just kind of move on from that one. And then the AIS one, I already mentioned AIS, so it's ship tracking. So what you can see in the background picture there is every ship that one of these satellites has picked up. So it's going around the world, it's picking up signals from every single ship. It's relaying back to the ground station, and then we're supplying that to our customers to allow them to track their ships or other ships or other things. There are other things you can do with this type of satellite and this type of capability, such as if you look for different radio signals, if you track the ships, all the ships should have this tracker. Some of them switch it off, not sure why, maybe nefarious purposes, but quite often they'll be using satellite phones, or they'll be using radar. We can hear those signals. So if you pick up signals that are from, you expect to see a ship, then the AIS signal isn't there. That's signal intelligence as well. So these types of satellites, again, things for low data rates, monitoring, IoT, they're really good capability for that type of thing. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the systems that we have, how we do a mission, how we put things up, and the types of data you can get from it. It's really difficult to try and explain all of this in 15 minutes, so I'm really glad that Hazel's talking next, because I think she's going to focus in on a specific mission, which probably gives you a better drilled insight into what it actually takes, because I feel like I've been very top level. But hopefully it was interesting and useful.
Thanks, Andrew. That was a great insight into what's kind of happening, on Clyde space, and it's one of the things which we're going to be, later in this in the summertime. There's going to be a new program coming out that will be open to any company based in Glasgow who is working in the space data area. So watch out for that on the Glasgow City Innovation District website, and we'll be able to talk a wee bit more about that. Okay, without further ado, please put your hands together for Hazel.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay as well? Perfect. So yeah, thanks Andy for a really great talk, and hopefully I can provide a little bit more context on a very specific mission that we're doing, which Clyde Space are also involved in, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So yeah, my name is Hazel Jeffrey. I'm the Head of Systems at Craft Prospect. For those of you, so today I want to talk about the VOLT mission. VOLT stands for Versatile Optical Laboratory for Telecommunications. There's a lot in it. It's a very complicated spacecraft. And yeah, today I want to tell you a little bit about that, and also about how a reasonably small organisation such as ourselves, we're around 30 people, were founded a few years ago, how we managed to secure the contract for a 17 million euro space mission from the European Space Agency. So for those of you who aren't aware, Craft Prospect is a space engineering practice. We were founded in 2017. We're based in Govan in Glasgow. And as I said, we've got a team of around 30 interdisciplinary engineers. So way back in 2017, we started looking at mainly mission and systems engineering. That was kind of our core background. We started working with organisations who had an idea for something that they wanted to do in space on an application, but they didn't really have the skill set to actually take that the full way. So we'd work with them to define what their mission would look like, to support them through the procurement phase, point them to other organisations like Clyde Space who could provide the satellite bus. And the Scottish space industry is huge, so there was lots of different organisations we can work with there, and then support them through the delivery and the operation side of things. When we were doing this work, we started noticing that there was two key technologies that we identified would massively impact the space sector. and that's kind of come true over the years. The first of that was onboard intelligence and autonomy, whether that's through artificial intelligence or just autonomy frameworks, and also quantum technology. So now, having worked in that region and starting to investigate those different areas and how they can be used for space, we started developing our own products in these two areas. So in the onboard intelligence side of things, we've developed a lot of frameworks for assured machine learning that can be deployed on satellites with not a lot of resources available. We've also developed something called a forward-looking imager or a context imager, which I'll discuss how that works a little bit later. And then in the quantum side, we've developed a quantum key distribution payload. So the idea of this is it doesn't strictly communicate with the ground, but it basically, the satellite and the ground terminal generate a quantum safe encrypted key. You can then, the satellite will move on. It can do that with another ground terminal. Once those two ground terminals have the same key, they can communicate securely on the ground. So it's enabling really secure communications on the ground as well. And from that area, we started looking at other things like optical communications and entanglement as well. So moving on to the Volt mission in particular, so as I said, it's quite a high value mission. It's €17 million in total. 6.5 million of that is coming direct to Craft Prospect. It's funded by the European Space Agency, and Craft Prospect is the mission prime. So we essentially are responsible for delivering all of the mission and managing all of the partners as well. So it's quite a big job. The aim of the mission is to deliver next generation capabilities for small satellites. So in particular, we'll be focusing on quantum secure optical communications, hyperspectral imaging for climate mitigation applications, some of which Andrew already talked about, and how you can use onboard processing and autonomy within a space mission to make the satellite a little bit more intelligent. And some key motivations for ourselves and some of the partners that are involved in this are, one of the main partners is BT, and that's a really large organization and has a huge amount of infrastructure, and are very interested in implementing things like QKD within that infrastructure to really help secure a lot of the transactions and communications they have within their networks. So it gives us the experience of how to work with a large organization, understand the security constraints that we have to take into account, and the same with all of our partners. And this in turn should essentially allow us to understand what it takes to work with big organizations and help us do that in future. It also provides amazing flight heritage for our own products that we've developed so far, and a really good high-profile demonstration of the services that we've developed through the mission and systems engineering side of the business. And a really interesting thing as well is it's allowing us to have the opportunity to align to future telecommunication standards and also cybersecurity standards. They're not at released stage, a lot of these things at this point, so being able to actually kind of understand this at an early stage and then adapt and also maybe shape some of those standards as well is a great opportunity for us. So in terms of what's actually inside Volt, it's a 16U CubeSat, so it's about 3 to 4 times larger than the spacecraft here. In general, relatively, it's still a small spacecraft, but it's large for the kind of nanosatellite size of things. And it's got a lot of technology packed inside of it. So to start with, we have a quantum classical optical communications module that's split into an optical transceiver, which provides optical bidirectional communications between the spacecraft and the ground. We also have a quantum key distribution module, which provides or generates quantum keys that can be then enabling for secure communications on the ground. This is supported by a beam steering unit, which essentially just makes sure that the spacecraft and the ground segment are really well aligned. You have a pointing system within the spacecraft, but the pointing that we need for this is extremely, extremely tight. So it's one of the biggest challenges in the mission. So we have a separate system for that just to make sure all the optical links are aligned and that you can actually close the link and communicate and send down what you need to. And then on the side of that as well, we also have the telescope, which basically makes sure that all of the beams are the right width, the right performance, the right power. We also have a high performance data processing unit on board. Part of this is to basically be a bit of a payload computer, so it can control all the different technology that is on board the spacecraft, process telemetry, all of that kind of stuff. The other side of it is what we call an experimenter sandbox. We have a separate device within that data processing unit that is essentially reconfigurable. It allows people within the space community or anyone who's interested in deploying software in space to deploy onto this device and run whatever application they want to do. So you can basically create your own space mission. You can access all the different payloads that are on board this spacecraft. That's all run through an experimenter service that goes through ESA. So you basically apply through ESA, and then we schedule it all in and schedule timing for how it all works on the satellite side of things. Really interesting thing about this as well is because it's quite high performance, you can also deploy machine learning and AI algorithms on board as well. So if you do have some kind of application that you want to demonstrate in space and see how it works, that service is available for that as well. We also have an Earth observation sensor package. So we have two separate imagers. One is a higher resolution hyperspectral imager. So it's about 5 to 10 meters on the ground resolution. It operates in the visible and near infrared region, and it can observe in about up to 32 separate wavelengths within that region at any one time. And then we have a wide field of view context imager with a neural net backend. So this can either look ahead of the spacecraft or it can look down to the ground. And it'll basically take an image. It's lower resolution than the other imager, but it's still good enough to be able to understand certain features. You can use a neural net or you can apply some kind of neural net to pick out things like clouds, which is what we're using it for in this case. Once you have that information, you can then send that data to something like the onboard computer or the payload computer, and then the satellite can make its own decision of whether it seems, for optical communications, for example, if it's useful to actually try and communicate with that area on the ground, say it's covered in cloud, that's not great for optical communications. You can make a decision whether you want to communicate with that part, or do you want to move it on later, do you want to use the hyperspectral imager? So it basically helps the satellite have a bit more context of what's going on around it and make decisions for itself, rather than everything having to go through a spacecraft operator. And then just to make things that little bit more complicated, we've got a bit of extra space, which we call payloads of opportunity space. And this is if there's any hardware that people want to demonstrate in space and get flight heritage for, we have some space allocated for that. So at the moment, we have a very, very low TRL entangled photon source, and we're wanting to demonstrate certain aspects of that to kind of help increase the TRL on that one. And there's additional space, so there's some other payloads that we're working on just now. So that's everything that's involved in Volt in terms of the services that we're actually wanting to provide to our customers and our stakeholders. That's split into 3 key services. The first is proving that you can do quantum key delivery from space in this size of a spacecraft and with the technology that we've developed. Then proving that we can augment that into existing and even future QKD networks. And then also prove that you can do quantum secured optical communications from space. The second is a concept called the Resilience Constellation Satellite System. So this primarily makes use of the hyperspectral imager. What we want to do here is demonstrate secure, assured, and taskable imaging to end users for lots of different applications. Our baseline just now is to look at climate resilience, more in the agricultural side of things. And what we want to do is be able to take a picture, have this on the spacecraft, apply some maybe machine learning algorithms or other kind of autonomous algorithms to actually generate the data product on board the spacecraft and send that to the end user. And that way, the end users are only really interested in the data. There's a lot of steps that go between getting a raw image from a spacecraft to actually usable data that they can build into their climate resilience models as well. So if we can do that, that would be incredible for the end users. And then we have the OPSAT experimenter servicer as well, which I discussed before. It's basically making the spacecraft a bit of an in-orbit lab for the wider community to use and test and see how their different applications would work. So it's a very complicated mission. It's been a long time working on it. It's probably been about 6 or 7 years in the making. It's essentially bringing together everything that Craft Prospect has developed. So way back in 2017, we started looking at a few different feasibility studies. We identified that the 2 key areas we wanted to look at was onboard autonomy and quantum technology. So we started looking at how could nanosatellites and CubeSats be used to augment emerging QKD networks and other highly secure networks on the ground. And then we also started looking at how could onboard autonomy really help generate the next generation of Earth observation satellites. And from this, there was 2 key themes that started to emerge. The first with the onboard autonomy is if you want to bring in any autonomy on board your spacecraft, things like machine learning or even just general autonomy, you really need to be able to know that it's going to make the right decision. And because, it's a very critical piece of kit and you can't just go up and fix it if it makes the wrong decision and potentially endangers the rest of the spacecraft. So you really have to assure that autonomy framework. And then also from the QKD side of things, if you do want to integrate into very highly secure networks and handle very sensitive data, then you need to make sure the satellite is as secure as possible. So we started looking into different kind of secure architectures and how could you make the spacecraft as secure as possible. And then from there, we kind of had enough information to start developing our quantum payload concept. So that was the kind of very low-level architecture starting to get through to prototype stages. And then at this point, we brought it all together into a mission called ROCS, which was responsive operations for key services. So this was essentially looking at how could you use machine learning to benefit and make quantum key distribution a bit more efficient. And that's kind of the idea of where you identify Clyde and let the satellite make decisions so you can basically use the resources that the spacecraft has in a more intelligent way. So we won a contract with the UK Space Agency to take that from initial concept through to prototype stage. At that point, we had already started developing some of our capabilities to the point that we could start to secure commercial contracts. One of those was the Resilience Constellation mission study, which was us starting to look at what the mission concept and how you could use nanosatellites to basically provide climate resilience applications. What kind of technology would you need? How many satellites would you need? All of that kind of stuff was involved in that mission study. And then after we'd finished the ROCS payload phase 1, we then got funding to actually take this from prototype level to flight ready, so essentially ready to be launched into space level. And unfortunately at this point the funding didn't go any further, so we did continue doing a few other commercial contracts. That really gave us the backbone to be able to reinvest in R&D. So at that point we decided to pull everything together yet again, so bringing in the hyperspectral and the climate resilience applications into what has become Volt. And that's backed by, we do have to match fund that, so that's backed by some of the commercial contracts that we secured as well. So we won that mid last year, and we've been working on that for about a year so far. So yeah, essentially how we did it was deciding 3 paths that we wanted to investigate and taking on very incremental small leap projects. At the start, it was mainly partially or at least fully funded by government organisations such as UK Space Agency, Innovate UK, Scottish Enterprise, ESA and COI. And then as I say, we got to a certain point that we could start to really secure commercial contracts. And yeah, that's kind of where we want to go as a business, is to continue innovating and to continue research and development, but you do need the commercial contracts and the commercial revenue to allow you to do that. And then yeah, so from all of this work, there was 3 key things that kept emerging as something that was pretty critical for any mission concepts and any products that we wanted to develop. And I think this is the kind of thing that basically led to us being able to secure the Volt contract, because we thought about these 3 things from the start of the business, and that is trust, assurance and partnership. So trust from the side of, everyone's starting to realise maybe how unsecure spacecraft were a few years ago. We're kind of waking up to this in the space industry, that cybersecurity is something that should be considered in missions. We've gone a good way, we understand all the different encryption schemes that you can use, but because we were looking at that from the get-go, we've started to look at how you can really embed security and trust into the design of applications, and having the quantum technology background as well means that we've had to think about that. The assurance side of things, obviously everyone knows that AI and machine learning has exploded, but you really do need to be able to trust the decisions that those algorithms are making for you, particularly in space. So again, that's something that we've had a focus on from the start. And partnership as well. We're a small organisation. There's a huge industry for space in Scotland, and we recognise that we can't do absolutely everything by ourselves, which is why we like sitting in the mission prime with a few product developments as well. So how we're developing this on Volt, we're making sure that any machine learning autonomy that we bring onto the spacecraft to create data products is assured. We're making sure that we can assure the data processing chain. If you're making changes to an image on board the spacecraft, you really need to make sure that no other third party or malicious third party can get in and manipulate the data, or even the metadata. Focusing on security up front, that's not just in the space segment, but also in the ground and operations and in our own company IT. And then making sure that we get through this with quite a large and varied partnership. And this is an example of some of the partners that are involved in Volt. So we have Clyde Space making the satellite bus. Nice applause for you. BT are supporting our quantum comms demonstration. Brit Ascension are providing some of the flight software and also a secure payload portal for the users to actually get the data that the satellites produced. University of Bristol and Strathclyde are supporting with quantum modelling, providing the optical ground segment. Resilience Constellation are obviously helping us develop the applications for the hyperspectral imaging and putting us in contact with the end users so we can really get the end user requirements out as far as we can. E2E Services, which is now known as Telespazio UK, are providing a reconfigurable optical FPGA, which is the base of our optical transceiver for the encoding and decoding. KP Labs are providing the high performance data processing unit. Think Tank Maths are doing some environmental modelling on the optical communication side, and we're working with Fraunhofer to continue to develop our telescopes and optics as they were supporting us in the rocks phase as well. And then, yeah, finally, just looking at the future, we've come a long way. So in terms of where we want to go next, we want to continue delivering and demonstrating smarter, more secure satellite missions. We want to provide components and services into Space 4.0, and then also just become a dynamic, assured and trusted prime for more complex space missions, whether it's interplanetary missions and much larger science missions as well. And sorry if I went a little bit over time, but thank you very much for listening, and some contact details there will be around to talk as well if you want to discuss anything today. So thank you very much.
That's excellent, Hazel. No, thanks very much. And it just kind of gives you kind of two visions of where two Glasgow-based businesses in the space sector and how they've evolved, and how they've evolved from that, developing the kind of CubeSats, but also then moving into kind of the kind of service side. So there's going to be a roving mic. If you've got any questions, please put your hand up. If please do that. If you've got any questions. The first thing I would like to talk about Space 4.0. So what plans have you got for that?
It's just to kind of help develop kind of technologies that would be useful for it. I think we're quite well embedded with it just now, and we're working with a lot of the larger space organizations, but I think it really is things like the quantum technology, working with smaller systems, trying to develop things in a much smaller form factor.
And I guess one of the things which has come out of this, if you looking at that last slide that you kind of put up, and both obviously the slide you put up yourself, Andrew, is that you've leveraged, you've connected into quite a lot of companies that are based within the ecosystem here in Scotland. Have you? Are there any other areas that we should still be developing or expertise, or do we have it all here within Scotland? Andrew?
Yeah, I think we have lots of things in Scotland. We don't have lots of them, and it's an industry that's grown really quickly. And the slide I put up, there was like 7 or 8 different companies I put on there, but there's obviously many more. And we need to grow the skills base. It's one of the real key things. So we've got a lot of the value chain. We also should be conscious of the fact that we shouldn't try and do absolutely everything in country. Because we can, to Hazel's point, like small companies shouldn't try and do absolutely everything, but we've got lots of this core capability, the kind of all the thread that runs through the entire thing. We have that, but we should grow it. We should grow we should make sure that we sustain it and we grow it in a way that's, people talk, I say sustainability is another one of those things that is a real buzzword. Sustaining the industry is really important. Making sure that the talent pipeline is there, making sure that they not just kind of funding SMEs and things. We need to make sure that there's an end point as well, that we encourage the entire pool.
And I guess that's one of the things which in talking about that is actually now speaking directly into industry in order to take the demand of the data that you're then being able to produce. Are you starting to have those types of discussions with kind of downstream companies? Is it now that we're shifting to? Do you think we're shifting towards more a downstream type sector, or does it?
Sorry, I'll go ahead.
No.
I don't think we're shifting to a downstream sector in its entirety. I mean, we've tried to shift it in the value chain because things can get commoditized. You need to still try and fuel your growth. So we spent a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time, getting into those data conversations, because people view us as a satellite manufacturer or a satellite bits manufacturer, but we're trying to deliver this data. So you have to have the right conversations. You have to understand what that capability, what that industry wants. Because I can take pretty pictures, but if there's not get scientific value or financial merit or value, then they're not going to work. So like timeliness is important to people, resolution is important to people. So having those things and conversations and understanding what the market wants is really important. I think this is the first time this conference has been in Glasgow, and it's usually in Edinburgh. Edinburgh is real strong in the data analysis and the data analytics stuff. And people using space data there. So we actually, again, we have another part of the chain of the users. And they're starting to learn, but what I don't think people understand yet is what can you do with a satellite that size, and how you can use that to fit into your data picture. And taking advantage of that. And if we try and shift fully to looking at data, we're going to forget about those fundamentals that are a differentiator to the entire chain. So we need to really protect that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Hazel, just kind of picking up on that as well. Are you starting? I mean, you're talking about. I mean, literally, you've got the kind of the CPU now in space that you can literally reconfigure at any time, be able to put any kind of experiment or any kind of process. Is that are you finding that that's opening up a complete new market now within the sector?
Yeah, I think so. I think the downstream sector is definitely growing faster than the upstream. I feel like the barrier to entry isn't quite as high.
Yeah.
And I think, as Andy said, like, you need to understand exactly what people want to do with this stuff to be able to design the system accordingly.
Yep.
So I think being able to be part of this experimenter service is opening us up to so many different organisations and different use cases as well. And that is what we really like, that we're trying to understand more novel mission applications and things like that. So it's a really good benefit there. And it's not just UK based, it's European, it's worldwide. So there's so much information that's coming into that, and being able to see how people want to deploy it, what works, what doesn't, I think is really useful.
So I guess that again, if anybody's got any questions, please put your hand up. We're open to taking them. But I mean, one of the things which struck me is that I think you're right. These these CubeSats have got lots of sensors. You can obviously, if you want to kind of buy one and launch one yourself, and then by all means, that allows you to be able to configure those sensors. But I guess the thing is that we need to get that commercial pool. Is there any particular kind of market sector that you're seeing that is pulling it? I know the environmental is kind of one of that, but are you starting to see any kind of trends that are coming from that commercial perspective?
I think for us, from the quantum side of things, the financial industry, I think is starting to kind of wake up to this. That's, we've been doing quantum development for many years, and it's maybe only been the last 2 years that we've been able to commercialize that, because before then it was seen as a technology that was far too early, that people weren't wanting to invest in it. And I think now we've matured it to a stage that people are actually able to kind of buy into it. So for us, I think that's a really good avenue to go down, and that we're getting pulled to.
Yep. And so one of the things within that is, again, like from a financial services company, even if you're an investor, we're starting to see that ESG governance, kind of reporting starting to come into, a requirement for companies to be able to report on. I guess that's what's, that's kind of, in some ways, that's kind of pushing that, driving that demand. Andrew, have you seen any of that?
We haven't done as much in that kind of sector. We'll provide the last time we have security on that. But I mean, I think for us, we are focused more in and around, at the moment, probably the two biggest traditional space data sectors, which is Earth observation and telecoms. Now, we're not trying to compete with Starlink, because that's not going to happen. But we're looking at what's the niche that fits this type of satellite, your IoT stuff, your low bandwidth stuff, your ship tracking. So the Earth observation, there's a key USP that these satellites can give based on availability, repeat times, things like that, and the telecom stuff is generally just a massive market. So we're focusing just now on those two in particular, to see how can we try and tap into them, because if you can tap into them, it opens the door to an awful lot more as well.
And just finally, one thing that each of you are looking forward to the future within the sector. Hazel?
Launching Volt will be nice, I think, in the next 2 years. And yeah, I think for us, it's really seeing what we can do with Volt, and then what kind of future applications and what smart things you can do with satellites, seeing where that goes.
That's great. And Andrew?
Launching Volt will be good. But for me, it's actually because Volt is a 16U platform that we're developing for another mission. So we're doing 4 Earth observation satellites using the same platform.
Yep.
So it's that Space 4.0 to me is also about constellations, is about interlinking all those things, reusing the designs and getting the growth that the market can achieve, and then really maximising what you can do with this type of satellite.
Excellent. I think certainly it's been enthralling. I think another enthralling insight into what's happening here for two of Glasgow's great companies in the space sector. Please put your hand together for Andrew and Hazel. And thanks for being a great audience. We'll see you soon.